let's get started with some of the dailies. We're looking at, I like to use Bukola's words, now spoiled for choice. Okay, Vanguard newspaper is where we start from. Vanguard newspaper, U.S. raises fresh concerns, tax FG on stronger action. That's according to what has played out in the Kaduna abductions for today. So, Bukola, this is where the U.S. is still maintaining what they believe it is. The Nigerian government has constantly said it is not only Christians that are targeted, Muslims are targeted. In fact, they argue that there are parts of the country where it is even more Muslims that are killed than Christians. But you know, the United States, they will hold on to their own. There are places where Christians are targeted. We cannot dismiss that. There are places where Muslims are also targeted. So this back and forth, at the end of the day, what we're looking at is the sanctity of human life. According to the Nigerian Constitution, 1999 as amended, the least the government can do in Section 14 and other sections that has to do with the duty of government to its people is the protection of lives and property. The security and welfare of citizens is the primary responsibility of government because the people, they are supreme. In the United Kingdom, the king is supreme, so he's sovereign. Here, where we practice democracy, even if sometimes African democracy is in different shades and forms, but primarily democracy says sovereignty belongs to the people. It is written in our constitution. And so the people decide who rules them, how they should be ruled, and what they need from their government. But the framers of our constitution have always maintained that the least you can do is to make sure that besides whatever it is, economy and the rest of them that you put in place, you must make sure that people are alive. Everybody has a right to life. As a matter of fact, even if you get a criminal today, he is not guilty by the Constitution of the Federal Republic until proven guilty by a court of competent jurisdiction. So we have a responsibility on our hands. I think the messaging by the United States is to the effect that even though they hold the framing of Christian genocide, maybe for their personal interest, but we also know that Christians are targeted in parts of this country. We have testimonials to that effect. We cannot deny that. It's to the effect that, look, you need to start valuing the lives of your citizens. People cannot just stay in their houses or go to places of worship. You know, at times of war, difficult times, if things are happening anywhere, one of the places you run to that is seen as a sanctuary is a house of worship, whether it's a mosque or a church or even a shrine. People are supposed to, back off. That whilst you are in your church or in your mosque worshiping your God, or even in your shrine, then somebody comes with guns and takes you out. No, it's failure of government. We're not saying the government is not doing anything, we're saying government is not doing enough. The day Nigerians will begin to feel a sense of security, a sense of safety, is when we see how government prioritizes the lives of our citizens. You see what happens when maybe in other climes, maybe United States and the rest of them, when something happens to citizens, you see how government rallies to protect, to rescue, whether it's health, whether it's security. You see the attention of government. But sometimes here, you see action, sometimes you don't see action. Then this recent one that just happened with the Kaduna incident, trying to manage the situation, but now it has blown in our faces and has further escalated what we've been trying to manage.
And just in reaction to that, Jeffrey, sometimes I would not like to call them the Islamic elite, but our brethren on the other side of the divide who want to challenge the narrative that it's Christians that are being killed predominantly, that the killings are happening on both sides. Some would quote the interview that the US president granted recently, particularly following the Christmas Day strikes in northwest Nigeria, where he acknowledged that indeed Muslims are being killed. But the US president in that interview reported by New York Times did double down on his position that it's the Christians that are being killed predominantly in Nigeria. While that continues to be a subject of debate back home here, we must, continue to push the definition of genocidal killings, which you always do well, to reinforce, Jeffrey, here on the program, that it is a matter of intent, not necessarily of number. So we're not talking about numbers here. And if we looked at the stories that have come through, particularly from Nigeria's North Central, and evidence abound from witnesses to events of killings here, they would talk about how after the killings have been done, their churches are burnt. So who does that? After killing people unprovoked, you go ahead and burn their places of worship. We can count the number of, attacks on churches in Nigeria's North Central, predominantly in the north, where worshippers have been targeted. And so can the intent be removed from this subject matter? If the intent can be removed, then we have taken out, that framing of genocidal killings. And that's where the debate continues. And until an acknowledgement is done, publicly by the Nigerian government, then there's still no commitment, there's no political will to address this matter holistically.
Yeah, well, I think we have the next one. You'll be taking the next one.
Yes, indeed. Speaking of which, let's head over to this Nigerian newspaper, which, is reporting something that came through yesterday from the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. EFCC indicts fintechs, banks in 162 billion naira scams, accuses financial institutions of compromising banking procedures. And so we saw this story come through yesterday, Jeffrey. Quite a number of Nigerians falling for scams that have to do with, cheap airline tickets. And so, questions were asked yesterday about how Nigerians can fall for such scams, where, especially where Nigerians mostly would book their, whether it's international or domestic travel tickets with, a local travel agency. So how do you know which is authentic and which is a counterfeit agency, and then you fall for such scams? Because 162 billion naira is quite a number, Jeffrey.
This conversation, we're not ready to have it. As far as this headline of what this Nigeria is leading with, when it comes to the thing, people are desperate on one hand, and there's a lot of, I believe, there's a lot of malpractice within the financial sector that the government needs to look into. Places that are not all commerce, that are technical to understand, it is easy to perpetrate all kinds of fraud, and you will not even know this is fraud in that sense. The level of deductions we see and all of those things. But this is primarily talking about some of these scams that has been reported by this daily, and it's just to minimize it, if you will. Maybe you may not be able to eradicate it, because even climes that technology is even more advanced. We see some of these things. In fact, we've seen some people being scammed right away outside their own jurisdiction. So you see, they say, oh, somebody in somewhere is scammed the U.S. government of this, that, and the other. So as a matter of fact, I will say that our banking system, for instance, if you compare to others, we've done well in several parts of our banking system, in terms of speed, in terms of certain kinds of efficiency. But within all of that, there's a lot of things that the government needs to look into and probe as quickly as possible. But let's look at this Guardian newspaper before we leave and get started with the conversation. The Guardian is saying how poor services, high cost, easy drug access fuel addiction crisis. I like the way Guardian always illustrates their stories, and I think you should go to page 4 and 5 and look at what they consider to be their big story. Since the reform that took place in Nigeria under President Bola Tinubu, a lot of things went to the roof. We've had interviews with people that were diabetic and see the high cost of medication and all of that. So sometimes people have died not because there is no service or whatever that is provided for them. It's just because they can't afford some of these medication. And then the issue of easy drug access, feeling all kinds of addiction, is another conversation altogether. And I don't want to even expatiate even further, because sometimes this addiction may not necessarily be hard drugs. It may just be a way to relieve pain that becomes a way of life, you know, for people who may not be able to afford totally taking care of the main issue that they are dealing with. So in terms of trying to relieve a particular pain in their life, they take the easy one just to manage it for the time being, and you know the knock-on effect it can have on people's kidneys and all of that. So I think it's a good read, and I like the way Guardian always illustrates it. So you can see the bottle that takes, you put your pill, holding onto the man's legs as much as he wants to run, is all over him and all of that. So let's see how all of this will bring some kind of consciousness within the health sector. I know Ali Pate, the Minister of Health and the coordinating minister of that sector, say he's done a lot in terms of that, but sometimes I want to see even more. I want to see in practice of what this intervention of government is. Bukola, sometimes what happens is if you're not buoyant enough, in fact, the average middle-income person, one dangerous ailment can just take you down to poverty. And that's why we need to do something quickly in terms of access to proper health care, cost of medication, cost of healthcare services, at least for as many people as can afford it.
And you know, we had a conversation with a pharmacist here weeks ago, and who, you know, expressed the view vehemently also that, you know, it is the absence of regulation that makes it easy for, you know, Nigerians to indulge in, you know, different forms of drug abuse. We can't even mention the many levels of drug abuse here, because it would be a sort of, you know, a soft way of,
on his own.
Yeah, you know, besides that, you know, a soft way of encouraging people to get to know about these drugs and then going there to purchase them. And so in the pharmaceutical sector, there requires more regulation, more vigilance. And there's nothing wrong with asking people if you have a prescription of a medical practitioner before going ahead to make a sale of a drug. Let's get to the New Telegraph. But we
yeah, we're
out of time,
we're
right?
We're totally out of time. But you can see the New Telegraph leading with that security story as far as the U.S. is concerned. So, as we did say, it's an ongoing conversation. We'll continue to look at it. But we have a broad conversation with a huge panel, so we want to start us quite early. And that has to do with voting in 2027. So my question to you, which Yaga Africa conducted with a sample size of about 1,500 or so, and they have a report to say 77% of people in Nigeria say they will vote, but they have a concern. We're going to look at that concern as well. Stay with us in just a moment. We'll be right back.